Hi, I'm Ellie. Welcome back to the Daily Brew and our Lines of Love series. Inspired by the New York Times Modern Love column, we're asking for all your stories about love at Stanford, whether that's self-love, friendships, romantic relationships, or anything else. Tell us about your freshman dorm community, the pets you miss back home, or even the chocolate chip cookie at Arriaga late night that you can't stop yourself from going back to every night. Whatever love means to you, we want to hear it. In this episode, I'll be reading an article published in the Grind section this past January called The Act of Returning. Clara Spars writes about coming back to campus after studying abroad and learning to embrace change and uncertainty. Afterwards, Clara and I talk about her experience studying in Madrid, what's changed since writing her article, advice to freshmen about finding their place in the Stanford community, and how she's been doing in quarantine. During the instances in which I have returned to something, an activity, a hobby, a physical place that I took time away from, there always existed a weird tension between the part of me that expected everything to carry on as it had before I left, and the part of me that recognized, with worry or anticipation, the impending possibility of drastic change. I gave up playing the sport that had taken up so much of my time in high school after graduating. When asked to return for an alumni basketball game, I found that while the basic athletic instincts hadn't left me, running up and down the length of the court in the same gym that had hosted my daily practices was, in many ways, entirely different. The court felt smaller, the physical movements more forced, but the thrill of catching the ball, harnessing control of whatever would happen next in the match, and the strange sensation of being watched by a crowd remained the same as it always had. When I returned for my quarter abroad this year, I assumed that not much would be different on campus. In many ways, I was right. The familiar faces that I would see in passing before leaving reappeared across campus, occasionally accompanied by new hairstyles, new nose piercings. The buildings looked and smelled the same. Sophomore year built up an enormous amount of insecurity in who I felt I was and how I fit into the schema of the Stanford community, which was a driving force in my desire to escape for a quarter. As the weeks abroad passed, I found myself growing nervous about what I would be returning to. Would the friendships and dynamics that I had left at school offer the same patterns and interactions, the same nourishment or discomfort when I returned? Would the classes I had pushed to the next quarter seem equally as daunting, or would I have gained some degree of encouragement over my academic habits and capabilities? Would the distance I had traveled and the juxtaposition of my experience abroad enforce a sense of appreciation for all that had been waiting for me, or would winter quarter just seem even darker and less exciting in comparison to my time away? At Stanford, though the weeks pass quickly with the pace of the term, I've learned that a lot can happen from one day to the next, perhaps even due to the urgency created by the passing of time. A relationship can stem and develop in the course of a week as people lean on each other for support. A student can get left in the dust after missing one assignment and have to spend the rest of the quarter making up for it. The other part of me, the part that knew that even the air would feel different once I set foot on campus, anxiously calculated the ways in which I might witness and be forced to come to terms with these changes. Coming back, however, I have witnessed a beautiful thing. The muscle memory of being a Stanford student has kicked in so that the bike rides to classes in the morning provide a paradoxical sense of new familiarity. I walk to Coho to drink a cup of tea with the people I spent every day with in past quarters and feel at home. It is almost as though I never left. At the same time, however, I have witnessed a growth in the people and circumstances around me. I am far from being the only one who has struggled with my time at Stanford. Coming back to hear the reflections and journeys that my peers have encountered while I was away has been a comforting reminder of the fact that we are all observing ourselves, all taking note of our strengths and weaknesses, of the ways that we can help ourselves and help others and make these changes. I've become a plant person, one friend explained. I've started seeing someone who makes me feel happy, another told me. I've lost a loved one, but in our grief, my family has gotten closer. We are taught to fight for change in the world, but I've noticed that we often find ourselves fighting change in our immediate surroundings. Going away, seeing my past from a distance, my future outstretched before me, was overwhelming. I fretted constantly about the fact that I would return to a familiar face ridden by unfamiliar circumstances. But I now see, from the small interactions I have that bring me comfort, from the exciting new developments I learn about in the lives of those I cherish, that there is just as much to be excited about in all that has changed as there is in the routines, the friendships, the rituals, and the love that remains the same. Okay, so you wrote your article at the beginning of winter quarter this year. Where did you study abroad in the fall?
I was in Madrid. We were in Spain for 10 weeks and we studied at the International Institute of Madrid.
What classes did you take?
I took a drawing class. I really like art, visual art in particular. And I also took a class on architecture. There was one that was just like a Spanish language class. And I did an internship. And during that internship, I actually taught Spanish to women who had escaped the human sex trafficking ring in Madrid.
That's really cool. What was the biggest difference between studying in Madrid versus at Stanford?
I think that a lot of the pressure on the academics themselves were off because I felt like the point of that program wasn't necessarily about the classes themselves. It was about experiencing this other place that we were sent to. And that was probably 90% of the purpose of traveling, to immerse yourself in the language and the culture of this like entirely new foreign country. It was a really different way to interact with my peers because it just felt like I was able to witness a sort of authenticity that not to say that people aren't authentic at Stanford, but just like I feel like when you get bogged down in so much work, it's hard to be fully invested in every interaction that you have. And so when people were like, taking these drawing classes and like these classes that aren't really going to be a source of stress for me, you really got to see the way that people would appreciate the sort of subtle intricacies of the world around them. Sorry, that's my dog. I have a huge German Shepherd.
You're fine. Were there any big culture shocks for you when you went?
It wasn't as diverse as I was hoping it would be. For example, my host family was just this single mother, and she was amazing. We were so close. But she would make these jokes that would not probably be considered politically correct in America. And then she would kind of laugh it off as like, oh, it's a cultural, like it's a Spanish thing. We joke about these things. And I'd be kind of like, well, I don't know, like, why are you joking about Native Americans considering your kind of colonizer history? I don't it was really, that was shocking. And like to be surrounded by primarily white Europeans constantly was a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, that's really surprising. In your article, you also mentioned that you felt insecure about your identity and your place at Stanford. Did you have that same feeling when you went to Madrid?
There's this weird thing where like because of social media, everyone kind of knows each other's names and faces without even necessarily knowing anything personal. And so in many cases, like I'll have heard of someone, like I've had a mutual friend with them, like I know their name, I know who they've like dated, I know like things about them without ever having spoken to them. And I think Madrid was really good for me because at first I was like, oh my God, I recognize this person, this person, this person. But then there were so many people who I had never interacted with, never crossed paths with in the Stanford community. And I think it was just kind of a reminder that like whatever sort of feelings of entrapment I was sort of feeling in my sophomore year, they were kind of like assuaged in the sense that recognizing that the way that I was getting trapped was kind of just by virtue of the fact that I follow routine and I run into the same people over and over again. And it wasn't necessarily because Stanford itself is small, because it's huge, there's like thousands of people, but it was just because I was running into the same people all the time and like not necessarily giving myself the time to step out of my comfort zone within the Stanford community.
Yeah, that makes sense. Has that feeling changed since you wrote the article?
Yeah, I think so. Going away for a while, it was funny to sort of see my life kind of suspended in front of me from a distance and just like thinking about all the different components that made me uncomfortable. I went through like a weird breakup my sophomore year, and that definitely contributed to me being like, what is going on? Like everything is stressful. Coming back and realizing how much I had missed the things that I hadn't had by having them, I was like, oh, like, I have so many really close friends here. I roomed with one of my good friends, and like, I also prioritize things differently. I just developed a different way of looking at academics, I think, while I was afar. I just didn't do anything I didn't want to and prioritize the things that I did want to do. I really like drawing, like I said before, so sometimes I would just like sit alone and draw for like 3 hours if I wanted to. And like, I think just like allowing myself that space and also like appreciating the good things I had was more of the energy that I was trying to cultivate when I came back.
For incoming freshmen, I feel like they might have the same worries or uncertainties as you did last year. Do you have any advice for how they could handle or process that?
I do think that it's good to try as many things as you can, like not turn away from anything just because you feel like you have some sort of conception of it, because I find that these things will surprise you, like joining a club, even, never having had any experience with the things that the club will do, if not for the activity, but for the people. I think I accidentally constricted myself to, like I said, my routines and the things that I was comfortable with. Like once I had this group of friends, I'm still friends with them and I love them all deeply. But, I want to be able to say that I made the most out of my time here. And I think a big part of that is the people. And so, like, not shutting any doors and like allowing yourself to meet as many people as you can, and also not letting the pressure of startup energy whatever you would call it kind of dissuade you from doing the things you want to do. Listening to myself and like taking those days where I didn't do any homework and I just drew and sat outside in the sun because Stanford has nice weather. Those were all like really important to me being okay and like feeling comfortable not only with myself but like with where I was and with the people around me.
How has taking classes at home this quarter changed the way your relationships form?
I've made so many friends wandering into a lecture hall and like sitting somewhere randomly and like looking over and making eye contact when I'm confused and realizing the other person's confused, and then we sort of like laugh about it and become friends after that, It's like those little opportunities you have to make friends. Also, just like with the friends you already have, it just becomes a little bit harder to keep in touch. Like I'm really bad at texting and FaceTiming. I get really overwhelmed really easily, and it's not because I don't miss my friends. Like I miss them so much, but I just find it really hard to like sit and text for like a long time.
Right. Obviously, a lot of things will change after this pandemic ends. What do you think will stay the same, at least for the Stanford community?
I think the value of friendships, I think people lean on each other a lot at Stanford just because like when the academics are really rough, or like when someone gets rejected from an internship that they wanted that's like really hard to get into, you lean on your friends. You lean on your friends for a lot of things. And I think that will, if anything, be even stronger when we come out of it, because we all miss each other and like understand what it's like to not have that kind of immediate community.
Lines of Love is produced by the Stanford Daily. This episode was produced, edited, and narrated by me, Ellie Wong. If you'd like to submit a story, please use the link in the description box below or go to tinyurl.com/linesoflove.